Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a pretty provocative video from the YouTube channel China Uncensored. They're making some big claims about China's military ambitions, and we're going to break down exactly how they build their case. The video kicks things off with this really stark claim. I mean, talk about an opening line. It's clearly meant to grab you right away and sets a super urgent tone for everything else they're about to argue. Now, just to be clear, our job here isn't to agree or disagree with any of this. We're simply going to walk you through the story they're telling, the narrative they've built, and the evidence they use to back it up. And it's probably worth mentioning that the video does frame its analysis with a request for viewer support. Okay, so where does this all start? Well, according to the source, the first piece of the puzzle is what's happening at sea. They point to what they call a clear pattern of provocations targeting China's neighbors, framing this as the first major front in their argument. As their starting point, the video points to a whole flurry of incidents that happened late last year. First, you've got this massing of over 100 ships. Then, a Chinese aircraft carrier actually locks its fire control radar on Japanese jets. And for those who don't know, that's the system you use to guide a weapon to a target. And finally, a joint air patrol with Russia. The video presents all of this as a clear signal of escalating force. And this is where it gets interesting. The source argues that these aren't just random, isolated incidents. They connect the dots, going all the way back to things that happened in 2013, to make the case that this is part of a long-standing, consistent strategy, and one that they say is only getting more intense. So the argument here is that these actions are happening more and more, and they're getting bolder. The video claims this is way more than just, saber rattling. They're positioning this as the very first layer of evidence for their main idea, that we're watching a nation actively get ready for a conflict. Okay, so after laying out the situation at sea, the argument zooms out. It broadens the scope from these specific actions to what the source calls a massive, long-term buildup all across the Pacific. This is what they label as the second front. And they frame it this way, using a quote they attribute to the U.S. Department of Defense, to argue that China is getting ready for a conflict that would happen on multiple fronts at once. Conventional, nuclear, cyber, space, the whole shebang. The core idea is that this is a huge, all-encompassing military upgrade. To back this up, the video points to some very specific upgrades on those man-made islands. They talk about new facilities for things like signals intelligence and electronic warfare, plus fortified emplacements for mobile weapons. The suggestion is pretty clear. This is about militarizing these outposts to project power. But their argument goes even further than just obvious military sites. They claim that huge infrastructure projects, we're talking ports, airports, communication systems, are being built for what they call dual use. So on the surface, they're civilian, but the video alleges they're really designed to support military operations down the road. And this really gets to the heart of what the source sees as the strategy here. The claim is that China is trying to leapfrog the traditional island defenses in the Pacific. The goal, they argue, is to directly challenge the U.S. near Guam, and, if it came to it, be in a position to cut off American supply lines in a conflict. And just to give you a sense of the sheer scale of this buildup, the source throws out this number, $50 billion. They claim that's the price tag for just one of these military strongholds in the South China Sea, which they say is now a base for destroyers and even nuclear subs. All right, so now the argument takes a pretty sharp turn. We're moving from the ocean to the mountains. The source brings up a third front, one they say is often overlooked, the super high altitude border between China and India. And what they highlight here is what looks like a major contradiction. On one hand, they note that the terrain and altitude make flying there incredibly dangerous, even for the best pilots. But on the other hand, they point to satellite images that they say show massive infrastructure being built for all kinds of aircraft, jets, helicopters, drones, you name it. The video gets really specific here, talking about things like dual-use villages, hardened shelters to protect military assets from an attack, and even advanced SAM sites, that's surface-to-air missiles, with these special retractable roofs. And they make a point to say that this design is the same one they've seen in the South China Sea, which suggests a kind of standardized, thought-out approach. So you've got these three different fronts, what's happening at sea, the buildup in the Pacific, and now this construction in the Himalayas. So how does the video pull it all together into one single cohesive warning? Well, here's their bottom line. This is the big conclusion they come to. They state pretty directly that when you add all of this up, it goes way beyond self-defense. They argue that this is all about preparing to strike first, especially when you think about a potential invasion of Taiwan. And the video presents all this as a direct challenge to what it calls a common misconception, especially among who they refer to as so-called China experts. They're pushing back hard against the idea that China is just inwardly focused. Instead, they're painting a picture of an expansionist power that's getting ready to project its force on a global stage. So by laying out all these claims, from the sea to the Pacific to the Himalayas, and weaving them into this one narrative, the video really leaves you with a fundamental question. It's all about strategy and intent, and it kind of puts it back on you, the viewer, to think about the evidence they've presented and ask yourself, where exactly is the line between national defense and preparing for an offensive war?